In 2003, I was finishing my undergrad at the University of Pennsylvania. Right? We're talking bastion of academic archaeology. The Penn Museum has been excavating around the world for hundreds of years, right? And it's Ivy League school, that kind of thing. You know, you're talking literally one of the epicenters in the world of academic archaeology.
Right.
And me at the time, I'm like a dude who gets stoned, right? So I'm like, you know what? I didn't even know I really wanted to be an archaeologist at that point. Even though my dad was one, I really didn't want to be one for a while because I was like, I don't want to just follow in my dad's footsteps, right? In the end, I realized, look, I actually love this stuff. So I went to it. But so I said, all right, what am I going to write my undergrad honors thesis on, right? To graduate with honors. Because I was a good student despite being a stoner. And so, and I also smoked pot because I have a chronic disease and it helps with it. And I smoked a lot of pot. And so I asked my advisor and I said, head of the department at the time, I said, look, what should I write my honors thesis on? Do you have any suggestions? He's like, you're about to go on a dig in Ukraine. Why don't you ask them if they have any projects? So I get in touch with them and they just ghost me. So, but because of the rules, I had to do an honors thesis if I wanted to graduate with honors, and I had to decide in my junior year before my senior year started so I could get going. And he's like, just pick anything you like. And I think it over, and then I go in there and I'm like sweating bullets. I'm like, could I do something on drugs in the ancient world? That would be really cool. And he's like, yeah, man, go for it. Go talk to Peter Struck. He studies like ancient religion and different stuff like that. Go talk to him. He might have some ideas. And so I talked to Peter and he's just like, dude, that sounds like an interesting idea. People don't look at this. And so you should come and take my classes next year. Let's think about how you could study drugs in the context of ancient religion. Okay. Right? Because that's what he focuses on. So the next term, he teaches a course on ancient Greek magic. Right. Or ancient magic in general, Greco-Roman, Babylonian, etc. And I'm sitting there and we read the Greek magical papyri. And I'm just reading through that. I'm still trying to get my specific thesis topic. At the same time, this is 2003, so we don't have the same kind of library resources we have today. So I'm going and Googling around drugs in the ancient world, and I'm getting like old issues of High Times magazine where they're like, this is the argument in there, is like the Romans used hemp fiber for their ropes, so therefore they're getting stoned all the time. And me being, I hope, a smart stoner, I'm thinking to myself, that's not the best argument. Like, hemp rope is useful. Hemp fiber we know today is very useful. It's a very strong fiber to make, textiles out of. So, but that doesn't mean they're getting high off the stuff. It means they're making, rope. And so I wanted real evidence that's direct, that tells me they are using drugs 100%. Right? So as I'm taking this course, I'm reading the Greek magical papyri, which are a series of about 100 different papyri. Yeah, explain it. They're all found in Egypt, and they date from something like, I think the earliest are from like the 2nd or 3rd century BC, so when Egypt is ruled by the Greeks, and the latest are something like the 6th century AD, so like, sort of early medieval period, right? But most of them are from like the 3rd century AD, the height of the Roman Empire type period, right? And what's really cool is, even though you can only find papyri in Egypt because it's so dry, they preserve. We do have some papyri elsewhere, like Herculaneum, the lava flow from Vesuvius, preserved this ancient library there. It's a philosophical library, and AI just helped unpeel it and translate it. The big news like 6 months ago. So we do have some from elsewhere, but we get most of our papyri from Egypt. That's where we get fragments of like Homer that dates, from the oldest fragments of Plato and Homer and whatnot, usually come from papyri, right, in Egypt. So we have all these papyri. Some of them are used as mummy cartonnage. They're recycled on these mummies, and when they take apart the mummies in the 19th century, they see there's writing on it, and they're like, and then they read it, and at the time, in the 19th century, this stuff was like satanic. Right? Because it's like the mishmash of polytheism. It's the stuff that ends up becoming, the witch trials and stuff like that, right? Yeah. And so scholars didn't want to touch it with like a 10-foot pole back in the 19th, early 20th century. The first class ever taught on...
Did something just happen?
Yeah, I saw the light change.
A light just went out or something. That was weird.
It did change. I'm with you. But okay, so the very first class, early 20th century on this stuff, they couldn't even call it ancient magic because they were worried about the reaction. So they called it selected papyri. And that was it. And then, of course, it's a class.
They were worried about the reaction from who?
I don't know, fellow scholars or the church or something like that, because everybody's very conservative. And then over time, especially in the last 30 years, 40 years, the first translation, the major translation of them by Betts, and Scarborough was the guy who did all the plants in them and stuff like that. That came out in the 90s, and since then it's been exploding. The field of ancient magic is huge because it actually changes how we understand ancient religion. And so what's really cool is we have throughout the Mediterranean world, and even as far north as Bath, England, for example, we have these lead curse tablets. Right? And these are, this is when you do magic. You basically inscribe a lead curse tablet, you roll it up because it's paper thin, and then you put it in a grave, or you put it in a well, or you put it underground, you bury it. If you're trying to curse your neighbor's business because they're your competitor and you don't like them, you bury it under their doorstep. If you want to curse that chariot driver because you root for the other team, you bury it on the racetrack. And we still have examples of this today. When they were doing Yankee Stadium, one of the construction workers was a Red Sox fan, or maybe it's vice versa. It's in the news. One of the construction workers was either a Yankees or Red Sox fan, the opposing team, and they actually put in the hole a jersey of the opposite team as a curse in a sense, right? Because this stuff pervades, right? And so what's really cool is we have some of these lead texts that are word for word the exact same spell on these papyri in Egypt. So we know this culture of magic and what's going on is very widespread. We don't know whether the Egyptian sources are a little biased. They have a lot of kind of Egyptian religion in them, like a larger amount than one would expect. But the whole culture of magic, it mishmashes different religions. It has kind of a little bit of Babylonian religion, a lot of Egyptian religion, Greek religion, Roman religion, Phoenician religion, different kinds of sources, Jewish religion, Christian religion, all in there, all within the same spell, because it's what's called syncretism. It's paganism. It's just a mishmash of stuff, right? They want to appease everybody they can to get the result they want, right? So I'm reading these, and guess what? A lot of these have drugs in them. Very clear drugs. Things like opium. Right? That is very clearly described. You burn opium incense, that then is supposed to summon a lover. And they even, I like this one. This is my favorite, actually. So it tells you how it works, right? Because it's this spell to get a lover. You're in love with somebody. You want to get them. So what you do, let me find it. Sorry. I'd like to read it on air because it's friggin' cool.
Apparently, Galen wrote about, Marcus Aurelius' physician wrote about how much opium Marcus Aurelius was taking. He said he kept having to up his dose. And he said he was getting so annoyed by it. He's like, this fucking guy, we keep having to get more and more opium for him.
Okay, so here we go. So this is the spell to Sword of Dardanus. It immediately bends and attracts the soul of whomever you wish. So you basically need to be a stalker to do this. Don't fucking do this. Just go like buy whoever you love some roses or something. Do something good, okay? But what you do is you sort of inscribe some charms and stuff on these statues that you make. And then what you do is you burn... Why is my computer stuck right now? And then you burn this offering to Eros, which includes 4 drams of opium, which is a lot of opium, right? We're talking like grams and grams of opium. And then you say this incantation. I call upon you unmoved by prayer by your great name. You want to go next?
No, you keep going.
Atalaf. I make my students do this.
You practiced.
I read this from my YouTube video on this. And like I said, I make my students do it sometimes when I'm teaching ancient religion. First shining, night rejoicing, night engendering, witness, erakistve, arakara, all right, whatever. You got to read all that stuff, and you got to get it perfect. And you're supposed to say it, I forget how many times, but you're supposed to say it several times. And so it's really cool because the spell actually says it has an excuse if it doesn't work. So you make the burnt offering and you continuously say the spell of invocation and send him the daimon that you summon, and he will act without fail. And whenever you bend her to your will with the stone, on that night it sends dreams. For on a different night it is busy with different matters. Now think about it. You're doing this spell, you're obsessed with somebody, you're going, you're inhaling all this opium, you go to bed, you have a bunch of dreams, right? Because that's what's going to happen, right?
Right.
And, whoa, that spell worked. The daimon was summoned. I had all these dreams. It didn't quite work right. I need to say Azaraktva instead of Azaraka. That kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so it's an explanation kind of for how it can work. And so I started reading these, and I found dozens of spells that involved ingredients that would, in our mind, alter your mind state. Right? They'd get you high, let's say, right? Something like that. And so I realized actually in these texts, there's a whole bunch of evidence for actual ancient drug use that isn't hemp fibers on rope. It isn't saying, well, this is a code word that might mean drugs. This is saying, these are the drugs. This is wormwood, this is opium, this is nightshade, this is henbane, this is what they're using. And they're using it, oftentimes ingesting it in some way or another.
Right.
Not always, but sometimes. And so, and like the nightshade ones are great. They have these ones of nightshade, some of them involve wormwood as well, where they actually rub nightshade on their body. There's one where they draw the daimon, they paint it on with this ink that's infused with the juice of wormwood, and then they put some nightshade in their ear, and then they have this, the description is amazing, they have this vivid vision of this daimon that comes to them and talks to them and answers any question they want to have answered about the past, present, and future. And it's like super described. There's some there, it's like everything becomes light. It's almost, anybody who's hallucinated will know that this kind of stuff sounds like what you experience, right? Light gets changed and things become trippy and stuff like that. And so you have these texts where they're describing it to you directly. We are taking a substance that alters the mind. We are having visions. And so I did a statistical analysis of it. Every single one, I mean, there's like a couple exceptions, but there's like several dozen examples of spells that involve clear mind-altering substances, and 90% of them involve some sort of altered state of mind that's very clearly altered state of mind, usually a vision. And so it's like, this is evidence of ancient drug use.
Yeah.
And I wrote my honors thesis. My committee fucking loved it. They were like, this is, and so I guess my point is it's not a thing as a field. Sometimes it's just individuals that are assholes. And I was scared of this. I was like, I now apply to grad school, a different group of people. And I'm like, fuck, what are they going to think of this? But this is my writing sample. I have to use something for a writing sample. It's going to come from what I know best, that I'm, at that point, that was my expertise. And so I'm like, man, everybody's going to reject me. I didn't. I got into grad school. And, my very first conference paper was about this. And everybody in the audience loved it. They were like, that's really interesting.
Right.
And so, I mean, there are some people that were probably like, meh, fuck this. And I talk about this even on my YouTube video and in my conference paper, how especially early scholars, up until the late 20th century, maybe middle 20th century, with the hippie movement coming in, they really did sneer at this stuff. And you could see it in their texts. I criticized this guy, E.R. Dodds, who was one of the preeminent scholars of ancient Greek religion. And he describes this vision that this guy, Aelius Aristides, saw, where he sees the god coming to him, and he describes how the emotions he feels, he's full of joy. It describes exactly what you'd think of somebody who's high, right? They're seeing stuff, their state of mind has changed. And then he's like, I loved it so much that the next day I drank even more and I saw God again.
Yeah.
And then and so it's like, bam. And then E.R. Dodds, in his book, he cuts out the segment of that passage from Aelius Aristides, The Sacred Tales, that says that what he's drinking is wormwood, a wormwood concoction. The same thing in absinthe. And then he's like, no, drugs couldn't have been the result. And so, like, don't get me wrong, there are biases, but to think it's everybody, my experience is not that. My experience is that there are plenty of people who are open-minded about this, and I think especially in the last 10, 15 years, the younger generation is now much more open-minded towards that kind of thing. It's like, nobody cares.